Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's topic is task breakdown. Activity is performed as part of which event? Is it sprint planning or backlog refinement? Answer is sprint planning. We already discussed about backlog refinement and sprint planning events in detail in our previous episodes. In this episode, we are going to cover about task breakdown. This is slightly a confusing topic because we tend to think, why can't we actually break stories into tasks and keep it ready in the backlog refinement meeting itself? So what happens in the backlog refinement meeting? In the backlog refinement meeting, as a team, we discuss about user stories or any work item. We try to understand what is the purpose of this, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, what is the business value we are going to deliver, and what are the risk and dependencies involved in this work item, and what are the possibilities or what are the options that we have so that we can solve this problem. Basically, we try to ask a lot of questions to remove the uncertainties, to remove the blockers, get more clarity, more information on work items. At the end of the backlog refinement, we also come up with estimation for these work items because we have good level of information. We have all the different parameters that are required for estimation, like business value, complexity of work, what is the amount of work that is required, what are the dependencies and risks that are associated. We have all these details, so it's very easy for us at the end of the backlog refinement to come with the value that is called estimation for these work items. Now comes the question, when we are doing all these things, we are also good to break down these work items into different tasks so that we can keep it ready there itself, right? The purpose of task is not to break down the story into different smaller pieces. That is not the purpose of the task. Purpose of the task is very, very different. Even though it looks like we are trying to make smaller portions of work that can be achieved with the help of task for the stories, but there is also a reason, or there is a different fundamental reason why we create task. So let's try to understand that, right? Now let's go to the actual answer, which is the sprint planning. Then I'll come to, when I'll be explaining that, you will be very well able to connect and understand why we are not doing this as part of backlog refinement. So let's go to the task breakdown activity. So task breakdown activity we perform in the sprint planning event. So what exactly we do in the sprint planning? As a team, we discuss with the product owner and come up with a sprint goal based on the priority. Now, as a team, to achieve that sprint goal, we pull the work items from the product backlog and we create the sprint backlog. When pulling that, one of the very important thing that we also consider is how much capacity we have and how much we will be able to commit. Because when we don't have bandwidth, we cannot work on those items. So even though we have a sprint goal, we are committing to the sprint goal as a team, but it is also very important how much bandwidth we have, what is the capacity we have. Accordingly, we pick up the work. So now as a team, we came up with the sprint goal. Product owner is also happy, team is also feeling happy, and team is going to commit this as their sprint goal. And we are also preparing the sprint backlog. So sprint backlog is going to have different work items like spike, bugs, user stories. All these things are part of technical debts. All these things are part of the sprint backlog. Now, in the team, we have a very mixed group, right? Some people are very good in front-end development. Some people are very good in back-end development. Some people are good with both front end and back end, full stack developers. And there are testers, there are designers, and there is also a team lead or architect who can actually help with certain aspects and may not have sufficient bandwidth to work on a complete story, but always there to help the team on certain decisions and also reviews. So now, when we take a story, when we own a story, the story is not going to be completely owned by a person. It is actually the team who is going to own that particular work item, which is the story. Now, for example, I'm going to develop a login page, right? So I need to design username, password, different fields, login button, and all those things. This is UI development. And in the back end, we also need to write the code so that the logic, when we enter the right username and password and click on login, it should take the user to the home page. Whereas if the username or password is incorrect, in those cases, it should throw an error, not an error, basically a message to the user saying that you have entered incorrect username or password. So this is actually the functionality, right? The logic that we are building. So someone is going to build this logic, someone is going to design the front end page. And some designer who is actually going to provide the wireframe, basically the UI UX prototype. And this designer is actually going to also contribute on this story to deliver the UI UX wireframe. So to deliver a story, we need contribution from different work streams. We need contribution from design, from front end, back end. We have some review process. We need to write unit test cases. We need to test the story. We need to add documentation for that. So all these different activities are really required as part of a story deliverable. So now, when we have these many work streams that are contributing for a story, it is really required to create different work items that is actually aligned to a particular work stream. A task for a design activity, a task for a front-end activity, a task for a QA activity. That way, we are clear that we are covering all the activities that are required in the form of task. That is not the only purpose. The purpose is, for example, I am a tester. So I'm going to test all the functional stories that we are committing as part of the sprint. But the catch is, I have already planned for 4 working days off. I'm planning a time off. So now, in 10 days of my sprint, I'm only available for 6 days. Now, in capacity planner, this has been planned, right? I'm unavailable for 4 days of the sprint. Now, when we are breaking down tasks, when tasks are getting added related to QA activity, I know I may not have sufficient bandwidth to help all the stories in QA activity because I'm unavailable. I'm going to be unavailable for 4 days. Now, when adding QA task, we are getting this question. Hey, Selvi is not going to be available for 4 days of the sprint. So how are we going to plan the QA activity? Now, as a team, we come with a collaborative option. We get into that collaboration mode and come with some options like, hey, why can't we perform some pair testing? Let's request Selvi to add all the test cases in the first 6 days when she's going to be available in the sprint, and let's review those test cases as part of our process, and we will ensure that we use those test cases and test everything. And in addition, maybe we can ask one more person to do exploratory testing. So for example, if I'm working on story A, I will be contributing to story B in testing, and someone who is working on story C, they are going to test story A. So that way we are actually ensuring someone who have not worked on that particular story is contributing in the testing, and also we are able to manage the things in a better way. So how we are able to understand this? We are able to understand this particular thing when we create a task. So when we start breaking down stories into tasks, that is when we identified what are the activities that are really required to achieve that deliverable. And when we were doing that, we also realized who is going to pick up that. And when doing that, we also realized whether they have sufficient capacity. If not, what is the option? So in that way, we are very clear what are the tasks that are required. Team already started picking up those tasks. They have already volunteered, like, hey, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on that, and they also called out when they don't have bandwidth. So in that way, we have a very clear plan. Selvi, all fine. This can be even done in the backlog refinement meeting, right? Okay, let's try to understand. What if actually we discussed about the stories, we have complete clarity. Okay, anyway, whole team is available. Let's start break down the story into different tasks. Okay, we are identifying all the activities. But what is the purpose of the task? The purpose of the task is not to break down a story into next level item. It is not the only purpose. The purpose of the task is also who is going to pick up that and whether they have sufficient bandwidth. In backlog refinement meeting, we cannot think about who is going to work because we don't know in that particular sprint what is the availability, what is the capacity of each and every one. First of all, we have no clarity when this work item is going to be picked up, right? Because backlog refinement is an event that will be happening as part of the ongoing process, right? We try to strengthen our product backlog. As part of that, we will be clarifying the questions, we will be estimating the stories and keeping the product backlog in the ready state. Based on the priority, based on the goal that we are coming up with as part of the sprint planning, we pick up things from the product backlog. It's not necessary that what we have discussed last week, next sprint we will be picking it up. Maybe priority would have changed. So product owner is feeling, no, this can stay for another sprint in the product backlog because we have other priorities to cover. So we have no clue which sprint this particular work is going to come. Even though if we task those activities, we will not be able to really understand whether who is going to work on that, whether they have capacity. If they don't have capacity, who is going to support, what is the option? That is part of the planning. We plan things so that the overall sprint execution is going to be smooth. If we do that in the backlog refinement, it is not going to benefit us. And estimation of the story, we don't come up with task and then estimate a story. No. Estimation of the story is based on the factors like amount of work that we need to invest, complexity, business value, dependency, risk, all these things. task is something which is at the next level. And that planning is required only when we have the clarity about the capacity of the team members and who is going to work on what. That happens as part of the sprint planning. That is the reason task breakdown activity is performed as part of the sprint planning event. So in a nutshell, task breakdown activity is part of a planning event. We perform this to make the plan much more simpler, and also it helps us in the overall sprint execution in a smoother way. If we plan the task in backlog refinement, it is not going to be helpful because we have no idea when this particular story is going to be part of the sprint. In which sprint it is going to be, we have no clarity. And task is also very important to identify the right owner and also their availability. That planning and that collaboration happens as part of the sprint planning event. That is the reason task breakdown is an activity that is performed as part of the sprint planning event. Hopefully, this topic is clear to everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Happy learning. Stay tuned.